Hello everybody, my name is Karryshh and welcome back to another recap video. Today it is a really great Japanese latest horror movie, Sayuri. Personally, I was waiting for this one for so long and I believed wholeheartedly that this would be one of the scariest Japanese horror of 2024. And guess what? For the first half of the movie, I was absolutely right. The first half of it was like super duper scary and creepy at every movement, and the second half is more like a revenge story, but that is good as well. It goes on the must-watch list from my side and I really hope you all will like this one, so watch the video till end. On top of that, if you're new to my channel, make sure to subscribe and give this video a thumbs up, cause that's the only way that get me motivated to bring more of these recaps. And with that said, sit back and relax as I recap this scary Japanese horror, Sayuri. The story starts with a really strange scene. We see a mother standing outside her daughter Sayuri's room with a plate of food. She's telling Sayuri that she should come eat with the family once in a while. And at the same time, we catch a glimpse of Sayuri's sister and their dad sitting at the dining table. Sayuri is in her room, and here's the thing, she was extremely overweight and not conventionally attractive. Hearing her mom, Sayuri starts throwing things at the door in frustration. But then, Sayuri opens the door and comes out holding a crowbar. She walks right up to her mom, leaving her completely stunned. The story from here skips forward several years and the house of Sayuri is now abandoned. However, that day a new family moves in, a total of 7 people. There's Norio, his younger brother Shun, their older sister Keiko and their parents Masako and Akio. Along with them are their grandparents Shozo and Harue. For this family, the house is like a dream come true, set near a beautiful hillside. Everyone was thrilled to be there, but we quickly learn that Grandma Harue has some mental health issue. She's forgetful, like she doesn't even recognize her daughter-in-law Masako. But trust me, Harue's character takes a wild turn later in the movie. The family starts exploring the house and everyone picks their rooms. Keiko, unfortunately, ends up choosing Sayuri's old room. Now when Shun sees that room, he gets a bad feeling about it and gets scared. So Norio offers to let Shun stay in his room. The whole family settles into the house and during dinner, everyone's chatting like normal. But Harue, the grandmother, keeps staring at Sayuri's old room in a really strange way. Everyone notices her gaze, but no one mentions it. Masako then mentions that back in the day, when Harue was younger, she was pretty terrifying. She used to hit Keiko when she was a kid and even taught her Japanese martial arts. Basically, Harue used to be super sharp and fierce. As they were talking, Harue once again starts looking at Sayuri's room, which was kinda creepy. Later that night, Shun is coming out of the bathroom and he gets a weird vibe from Keiko's room. He runs back to Norio, but meanwhile in Keiko's room, the TV suddenly turns on by itself. It was playing a comedy show, but Keiko just switches it off and goes back to sleep. However, we see Sayuri standing right behind her. The next morning, Keiko isn't feeling well, and it becomes pretty clear that Sayuri's curse is going to hit her first. After breakfast, everyone leaves for their work or school, and at school we meet Norio's 2 friends, but the story focuses more on his connection with Sumida, a girl in a lower grade. After class, Sumida asks Norio if something's been going on cause he's been looking super tired lately. Norio tells her that it's probably cause they just moved into a new house, and hearing that, Sumida suddenly gets nervous and runs off, telling him to stay careful in that house. Now that night, Keiko is sleeping and once again, the TV in her room turns on by itself. This time something worse happened. A evil, really creepy laughter starts echoing from the TV. Keiko tries to turn it off, but it won't shut down, and then suddenly out of nowhere, an evil little girl spirit appears in the room and grabs Keiko's hand. The scene shifts to Shun, who wakes up to use the bathroom. He walks downstairs, but he suddenly sees Keiko standing there, and she was just standing still with her mouth open in a creepy way. Shun gets confused, so he walks up to her and tries talking to her, but out of the blue, Keiko grabs his head and slams it against the wall. Shun's nose breaks and he starts crying. Hearing the commotion, Norio comes downstairs and asks Keiko what she did, but then Keiko slams her own head into the wall and snaps out of the possession. The rest of the family then rushes to the scene and they try to comfort Shun, but Keiko does not remember a thing about what just happened. At the same time, Haruhi was looking into a mirror and she sees Sayuri standing behind her, but when she turns around, no one was there. The next day at school, Norio meets Sumida on the rooftop. He tells her about what happened the night before. We also find out the family took Keiko to see a doctor, and the doctor says she might have been sleepwalking. Hearing this, Sumida tells Norio that he needs to convince his family to leave the house because it might be cursed. But Norio just laughs because he doesn't believe in that kind of stuff. On his way home that day, Norio runs into a neighbor, Misai, who's snooping around the house. She introduces herself and says she lives nearby, and then she starts asking if everything in the house is okay. Her questions seem weird to Norio, so he just rushes into the house, ignoring her. That night at dinner, things seems normal again, and even Keiko looks like she's doing better. But then, out of the blue, she throws up this strange white substance. Akio and Masako rush to help her, but before they can do much, she throws up again, this time all over her mother's head. That night, after having a terrible nightmare, Akio wakes up. He goes to check on his kids, but on his way back, he notices Keiko's bedroom door is wide open. From inside, he hears that same creepy laughter, and when he looks in, he sees Keiko watching TV. Now, as soon as Akio steps into the room, something strange happens. He's suddenly transported to a completely different place. The room transforms itself into what used to be Sayuri's room, filled with empty food wrappers scattered everywhere. Confused, Akio calls out to Keiko, but before he can make sense of it, the spirit of the little girl appears, and just as Akio turns around, the girl's form changes into Sayuri's evil spirit. And it basically means the little girl we are seeing was actually Sayuri all along. Sayuri then grabs her crowbar and brutally smashes Akio's head, unaliving him on the spot. The next morning, Masako goes looking for Akio and ends up in Keiko's room. That's when she finds Akio's body, and obviously she was absolutely horrified. But Keiko, she was just peacefully sleeping, totally oblivious of what's happening. The scene cuts to Akio's funeral where the whole family was crying, but Keiko was confused, wondering why her dad was in her room when he died. She then refuses to sleep in that room again, and back at the house, the family sets up a shrine for Akio. They spend the evening sharing stories about him, but then Haruhi, Akio's mother, starts calling out for him to come eat dinner. Now here, Norio gently reminds her that her son is gone, but hearing this triggers something in Haruhi. Her old terrifying self comes out. Suddenly she jumps on the table and twists Norio's hand with immense strength, and she starts yelling at him for talking about Akio like that. The family quickly calms her down and puts her to bed, and we find out that whenever Haruhi experiences intense trauma, her memory issue vanishes and she becomes her fierce self once again. On the other hand, Keiko was in the process of moving into the room across her old one, where she suddenly hears that evil laughter again coming from her previous room. She turned around and then Sayuri started slowly emerging from the wall, and this scene becomes the creepiest scene of this movie. Terrified, Keiko locked herself in her new room, and she finally realizes that this house is definitely cursed. The next day at school, Sumida approaches Norio to offer her condolences, but then she told him something unsettling. Apparently, Sumida had the ability to see bad things, and for a while now, she'd been seeing a little girl hovering around Norio, and she was convinced that she was related to that house. Now, Norio thought about what she said, but he wasn't taking it too seriously at first. That night, Keiko skipped dinner because she was too scared to leave her room, and while the family was eating, Norio suggested that they should move out of the house. However, Masako started crying, saying they couldn't leave because the house meant so much for Akio and she just won't abandon it. Then once again, Haruo started looking at Sayuri's room as she shouted, "What's your problem? Why are you making so much noise?" And hearing this, Norio got even more frightened and he starts to believe what Sumida said. In this very moment, we see something happening to Shozo, and as a viewer, we can comprehend that the curse may have gotten to him too. Later that night, the creepy laughter from Sayuri's room comes again, and the laughing sounds keeps Keiko awake all night. Then the next morning, when Norio woke up, he saw Shozo outside the garden, digging a hole with his bare hands. Norio then ran to stop him, but it was like Shozo was not even in control of his body. Masako came out to help, but she couldn't stop him, and finally Haruo showed up. She started talking to Shozo like he was a child, and for some reason, that brought him back to his senses. Shozo even began walking towards Haruo, but then Shozo suddenly collapsed to the ground. Everyone instantly calls an ambulance, but in the next scene, on the dinner table, Haruo was calling for her husband to join him. But when we see the family shrine, we witness Shozo's picture was added alongside Akio's, meaning he died as well. Now after this, Norio started to believe that something is really wrong. He was out of the house that evening when Sumida approached him. She then asked him for his number, and during their conversation, she found out about Shozo's death. Hearing this, Sumida grabbed Norio's hand and told him to stay calm so she could figure out what was happening to him. The moment she held his hand, Sumida was pulled into a vision of that house. Sayuri's laughter echoed through the place, and Sumida found herself face to face with a younger version of Sayuri. She also saw Haruo, and Grandma didn't seem afraid of Sayuri at all. Then Sayuri began walking towards Sumida, but as she moved, she started growing bigger and bigger and bigger with each step. Terrified, Sumida fell back and snapped out of the vision, only to immediately vomit that strange white substance. That's when she realized the truth. The evil spirit in Norio's house wanted to unalive his entire family. She told Norio to leave the house before the spirit wiped them all out, but Norio admitted that he wanted to leave but couldn't convince his family. And now Norio was even scared to go back to his house. Desperate for help, Norio went to his neighbor Misai and told her everything. Misai already knew that the house was cursed and immediately called a shaman, and she promised him that the shaman can fix things. Now all Norio could do was wait for the shaman to arrive so he goes back home. That night, as everyone was sleeping, Shun went to the kitchen to grab a drink. On his way back, the hallway light starts flickering. Then out of the blue, Keiko appeared in front of him. She now looks completely possessed, and just as suddenly as she appeared, she vanished into thin air. Shun goes upstairs looking for his sister, but then an evil force shoves him down. Now we see the limp body of Shun disappears from the staircase, but then reappear moments later, standing beside his possessed sister, and it seemed like both of them are now possessed, and the curse tonight is going to do something horribly creepy. Scene shifts to Norio, who was sleeping, when possessed Shun appears and starts calling out for his brother, trying to wake him up. After a while, when Norio finally wakes up and hears his brother's voice calling him downstairs, he goes to check it out. Norio looks for his brother but was unable to find him, and the voice keeps shifting. Sometimes the voice came from upstairs, then downstairs, then coming from random corners of the house, but Norio was unable to find his brother. Frustrated and scared, Norio searches the entire house, and then in the end, Shun falls from the upper floor straight onto the dining table. His neck broke immediately, and seeing his little brother's lifeless body, Norio is horrified to his core. He ran downstairs and wailed uncontrollably on his brother's body. But before he can process what was happening, possessed Keiko appears behind him. Keiko was holding a baseball bat, and without hesitation, she attacks Norio. Norio dodges the attack and ran for his life, and desperately tried to both escape and snap her sister out of that possession. But during the struggle, the bat slipped from Keiko's hand and Norio grabs it. However, then Keiko goes and picks up a knife instead. She stands in front of Norio, but tears were coming down her face, and she was asking for help, telling Norio that she has lost all control of his body. And then suddenly, Keiko put that knife in her neck, unaliving herself in front of his brother. However, this was not the end, cause from behind him his mother Masako appears. Her expression was cold and lifeless, and she was clearly under the curse now. Masako then looks at Norio and says, "I'm so tired," and then she walks into a room where the door shuts itself behind her. From inside the room, Norio hears strange noises and Masako's voice muttering something about wanting to go back when she was happy. Now when Norio finally manages to open the door, it was too late. Evil Sayuri had already unalived Masako in a horrifying way. Obviously, Norio completely loses his grip on reality because his entire family is now dead. But then the sound of Sayuri's creepy laughter echoes through the house, scaring Norio to death. Terrified, he hides under the bed, but evil Sayuri enters the room and slowly walks towards him to unalive him. Norio thought this was the end, but then Grandma bursts into the room, and without a second thought, she flips over the bed, exposing Norio and kicks him hard, yelling him to snap out of the fear. Grandma says that she thought she was dreaming, but she's now guessing that the little girl actually unalived her entire family. Norio breaks down into tears, but Grandma yells at the spirit that "You're done, kid. You're not getting away with this." She turns to Norio and scolds him in a tough love manner, telling him that they're going to send that spirit back to hell and take her revenge. And up until this point, the movie's been terrifying, as you can probably tell. But what happens next takes a sharp turn. It becomes all about Grandma Rowdy over the top revenge. Now the police arrives and take the bodies away. They also take Grandma and Norio to the station, and meanwhile the neighbor realized that the spirit killed everyone before the shaman could even arrive. Afterwards, we see Grandma, who has completely changed into a different human being. She starts smoking cigars, driving really fast, and blasting loud music. She takes Norio back to the house and laughs wildly at the gate and tells him that they shouldn't fear the spirit. Instead, they need to mock it, laugh at it, and humiliate it to weaken its power. Basically, the more scared they are, the stronger the curse gets. Back at the house, Norio starts cleaning up the bloodstains from her sister's death. While he's scrubbing, the lights in the house begins to flicker again, and Grandma shouts, "Replace all these old-ass bulbs, they're ancient." And Norio doesn't argue, he's on board with whatever she says at this point. That night, Grandma reassures Norio that nothing's bad gonna happen now cause she's back on track. Then the next day, she kicks things into a high gear. Grandma basically turns into a drill sergeant, putting Norio through rigorous training to prepare him to fight the spirit. According to Grandma, Norio needed to build up his body, because if they're physically strong, the spirit wouldn't be able to harm them as easily. She made him eat a ton of food and taught him martial arts, saying it would help him control his mind and keep fear at bay when he's dealing with the spirit. The key was simple, they couldn't show any fear. Grandma kept Norio out of the house all day, bringing him back only to sleep at night. This way the curse had a less of a hold on him. Then one day while cleaning, Norio spotted Grandma digging the same spot where his grandfather had previously dug. It scares him and he ran to her, but she explained that she's fine. She was actually digging on purpose to figure out why the curse had compelled his grandfather to dig there. They ended up finding some things in the ground. There was a school bag, a shoe, and Sayuri's skeleton. It shocks Norio, and Grandma took everything inside. And from the school ID in the bag, they finally learned the spirit's name, Sayuri. The school address was also on the ID, giving them a lead to investigate. Grandma actually had a theory. Someone must have killed Sayuri, which is why her spirit is haunting this house. But just as they were discussing this, the house was suddenly plunged into darkness and Sayuri's spirit appeared in the kitchen. Without hesitation, Grandma walked straight into the kitchen and Sayuri vanished, but Grandma shouted into the darkness, "How long are you going to pretend to be a little girl? I know your real form is a big, fat, ugly pig." Then right on cue, Sayuri revealed her true self. Grandma smiled at her. Then without fear, Grandma just walked right past her and Sayuri's terrifying form began to dissolve. Grandma then shows Norio this weak spirit. According to Grandma, her will to live was so strong that not even the curse could overpower it. She compares it to Akio, who was always so worried about taking care of his family, and that was why the curse took control of his mind, which led to his death. One by one, the curse killed everyone else because their minds grew weaker after each death. Then Grandma tells Norio to say something harsh to the spirit, and as soon as he does, the spirit disappears, and both of them burst out laughing. And Grandma says that us living people can be so terrified that even ghosts are afraid of us. The next day, Grandma sends Norio back to school as usual, and Misai shows up with a shaman at their house. Misai tells Grandma that she knows the entire family is gone, and she understands the pain Grandma must be feeling. But Grandma responds by blowing cigarette smoke right in Misai's face. When Misai introduces the shaman, Grandma slaps Misai and she went reeling away. Grandma tells her that she doesn't need anyone's prayers. The shaman tries to reason with Grandma, but she slaps him too and kicks both of them out. At school, Norio is back to being normal, trying to stay happy so the curse doesn't take control of his mind. At home, Grandma calls a detective and pays him to find out everything about Sayuri. Now for just a moment, she gets emotional while looking at a photo of her late husband. And in that very instant, the curse drags her into a vision. In the vision, Grandma sees her husband slowly walking towards her in the garden, which makes her even more emotional. But then Sayuri shows up and unalive him with a crowbar. She does this to weaken Grandma, and once again her husband appears alive and tries to approach his wife. But Sayuri once again brutally murders him in front of Grandma, where blood splatters all over her face. Sayuri then moves to attack on Grandma, but Grandma tells her, "I am fine, kiddo," and she ignores the spirit so much that she breaks free from the vision. She shouts at Sayuri and threatens her to send her back to hell. Meanwhile, at school, Sumida notices that Norio is happy and she was confused by it. Norio explains that Grandma is taking care of him and that no ghost can harm him while she's around. Sumida talks about coming over to his house, but Norio refuses because her heart is weak and the curse could affect her immediately. He reassures her that he is fine now, and that evening, Grandma was leaving house because she had learned something new about Sayuri, and she tells Norio to stay at a hotel. But Norio feels like he was ready to stay alone, and so he did. Grandma then leaves and Norio practices martial arts to keep his mind calm. And he was not even scared when the spirit starts flickering the lights. Later that night, while watching a comedy show on TV, Sayuri's laughter suddenly comes from the TV. And then she appears in the kitchen. Norio doesn't even flinch at her and continues to ignore her, and eventually she disappears. Meanwhile, Grandma arrives at Kujio's family house, and we learn that Sayuri's full name is Sayuri Kujio. The scene shifts to Sumida, who is on her way to Norio's house because Norio isn't picking up his phone. Back at the house, Norio was sleeping when suddenly the lights of the house starts flickering. Norio tries to keep himself calm, but then Shun's body falls onto the dining table from above. Seeing this, Norio completely loses his composure and starts crying hysterically over his brother's body. But then Sumida wakes him up. and he realized it was just a dream. But obviously, Norio freaks out seeing Sumida inside the house and he immediately tells her to leave. But Sumida insists that they should both go outside together. She says she had a terrible nightmare, but Norio refuses to leave the house because he wasn't going to let Sayuri scare him. Sumida was worried that Sayuri will unalive Norio, but her panicking makes the curse stronger. Suddenly, the lights in the house go out and then Sayuri steps out of the darkness, grabs Sumida and drags her away. Sumida disappears and Norio was scared to death and he started screaming, which gives Sayuri more power. Sayuri laughs in the house and then appears right in front of him. In an instant, she attacks on Norio but he manages to escape and runs out of the house for his life, where Grandma arrives just in time. Seeing Norio crying, Grandma first slaps him and tells him to snap out of the fear. Norio then explains that Sumida is gone, but Grandma thinks that if Sumida has just disappeared, she might still be alive and they can save her. Then we see that Grandma had kidnapped Sayuri's entire family and they were tied in the trunk of her car. Grandma actually had learned that the police thought Sayuri was missing, but that was not true. The real story of what happened to Sayuri is actually related to Sayuri's family, and that's why Grandma had kidnapped them all. Now Norio doesn't like this idea because it's a crime, but according to Grandma, this is the only way to save Sumida and get their revenge. In the end, Norio and Grandma bring the family inside and wait for them to come back to consciousness. When the family wakes up, Grandma shows Sayuri's family Sayuri's bones and asks, "What did you do to Sayuri that made her kill my family?" She knew that they were the ones who unalived Sayuri, but she wanted to hear that from their mouths. The three of them stay silent and then Grandma says, "Cause of you three, 5 members of my family died. Akio had a heart attack, Masako hung herself, my husband passed away, my grandson was thrown off the roof, and my granddaughter stabbed herself. And now it's time for my revenge." Grandma then picks up a hammer and she beats the hammer on Sayuri's dad's feet badly, and then she goes and smashes the hammer on Sayuri's sister's head. Sayuri's mother starts begging for mercy, but Grandma then hits her too and tells her that she doesn't want an apology, she wants her revenge. After hitting all 3 of them with the hammer, Grandma picks up a small knife and stabs Sayuri's dad first and then goes and stabs her mom's feet. She then screams and tells Sayuri to come out and tell her story so everyone can understand why she is in this house. Finally, Sayuri answered and the entire house started shaking. And with that, we go back in the time where we finally learn the truth about Sayuri's story. In the past, little Sayuri was making a picture of her family. Everyone loved her, but one day, Sayuri's dad took her into a room. And yes, Sayuri's dad did something unthinkable that we all know what he did. He molested her and even used the same crowbar on her, but it wasn't just that, because that same day, Sayuri's mother saw her husband doing this but chose to stay quiet because she didn't want to break up her family. And after that day, Sayuri became depressed. Sayuri stopped eating and her dad started doing the same thing to her every day. One day Sayuri complained to her mom, but she was a fearful woman and she used to live by her husband's rules, and that is why she just ignored her. And one day when her dad was about to molest her, she threatened him by placing a pair of scissors on her throat. She then kicked him out of the room, locked the door and cut her hair. Sayuri began thinking that if she became fat and ugly, her dad wouldn't do those terrible things to her anymore, and that's why Sayuri spent her whole life locked in that room and she did become fat and ugly. Her mom always felt guilty for not protecting her, and this is where the scene we saw in the beginning of the movie begins. Sayuri's mom brings her food, but that day Sayuri goes crazy and decides that she needs to end all of it, her entire family. That's why she picked up the crowbar and she went to attack her mother. Her mother managed to escape and run downstairs for her life, where Sayuri's father was shocked to see this scene unfold. Before Sayuri can further harm her mother, her sister pushes her down. Sayuri's sister then fights her, and in the end, Sayuri only had one question. Why did this happen to her? Sayuri's sister then tells her that if she dies, everyone will be happy. And at this point, her whole family catches her. Her dad strangles her to death because obviously he was a rapist and he needs to get rid of the evidence. But her sister helped in this murder because she thought if Sayuri died, everything will be fine. And her mother helped too because obviously she was under her husband's control. So that's how Sayuri dies, and now everyone understands her story. Grandma tells Sayuri to show herself and take revenge on her family, but leaves Sumida alone. Then from above, the crowbar falls and evil Sayuri appears to get her revenge. She picks up the crowbar, moves towards her dad, and brutally unalives him by shoving the crowbar into his backside. Then she moves to her sister, who keeps begging for forgiveness, but Sayuri instantly unalive her with a single blow. Finally, Sayuri goes to her mom, and she still loves her mom because she knows her mom is suffering and has realized her mistakes. But since her mom had seen her being raped and did nothing, Sayuri gouges her mother's eyes out. Seeing all that, Grandma understands that Sayuri can't kill her mother and that her mom might be her weakness. That's why Grandma immediately grabs Sayuri's mother and ties her up. Grandma and Norio then tell Sayuri that they will unalive her mother if she doesn't bring Sumida back. But then, Sayuri attacks on Grandma with the crowbar. At this point, Grandma realizes that Sayuri's curse is growing stronger and it's starting to overwhelm her as well. Norio helps Grandma and now they both face Sayuri. Grandma takes a defensive stance and Sayuri opens her mouth to show Sumida, who was trapped inside of her. Sayuri ran towards Granny and in that hassle, she injures Grandmother's hand, making it start to turn black. Whatever she did makes Grandma fall to her knees and she realizes that she may not be able to fight this evil anymore. She tells Norio that to fight this spirit, he needs to focus on his feelings for Sumida so that she stays alive. After that, blood pours from Grandma's mouth and she fainted. Now in the end, it's just Norio left, facing this demonic force alone, but he doesn't give up. He picks up Sayuri's skull and starts biting into her bones to calm his mind and intimidate the spirit. Defensively, Sayuri unleashes some evil tentacles from her mouth and Norio had to fight his way through. He eventually reaches Sayuri's mouth where Sumida was trapped. It was a struggle, but after a lot of efforts, Norio fights off the tentacles and grabs Sumida's hands, pulling her back outside in the real world. Finally, Sumida was saved, and luckily, Grandma wakes up again with an astonishing turn. Actually, you see, the dark power from Sayuri's curse somehow gets inside Grandma's black hand, and using that power, Grandma fights Sayuri. Grandma uses her martial arts technique, and in the end, she banishes Sayuri's evil form. But then, small crying version of Sayuri appears and reveals the true curse, which was this innocent girl who was turned into a monster by her family. Now when Sayuri's mother hears her daughter crying, she rushes over and she hugs her. She apologizes to her daughter for her mistakes and Sayuri in her heart forgives her. Afterwards, Norio's whole family joins Sayuri, and in the end, Sayuri's curse is finally lifted. All the souls are at peace and the spirits vanish. Sayuri even heals her mother's eyes before leaving, but her father and sister were dead. Now as everything returns to normal, Grandma once again becomes her sweet, innocent self, forgetting everything because the trauma was healed and her revenge was complete. The police arrives and the bodies are taken from the house. Sayuri gets a proper burial and Grandma moves into a nursing home. We then find out that the haunted house was later destroyed since no one would buy it anymore and Norio continued to visit his grandma. In the final scene, we see Grandma, Norio, and Sumida walking together, and near a beach, for one last time, Grandma wakes up and tells Norio that no matter how many evil things life throws at him, he should always laugh at those evil things. And whenever he remembers Grandma's tough side, she will be there to meet him. Then Grandma becomes her sweet self again, and the movie ends on this bittersweet note. So this was the recap video on the movie Sayuri, and I hope you have liked this video. If you have, then please subscribe the channel and give the video a thumbs up. I really need your support to grow further. If you wanna watch this movie, there's a link to my Telegram channel in the description box. If that link does not work, just go to Telegram and put my channel's name in the search bar. However, Sayuri is not available to stream anywhere right now, so just wait the time out and I will eventually put the movie's link on Telegram channel. For now, I see you all in the next one. Till then, stay awake, cause they always see you.